This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, everybody. I think we're getting closer to being able to get back in person pretty soon. I'm hoping pretty soon we can do that. I think we'll keep uh, still offering the online, but I miss seeing people. I miss having there's a different interaction when you don't have to. You're muted. You're muted. We don't have to do that. It's just a lot more naturally flowing when when we could actually talk to one another as opposed to talking to these boxes on our computer screen. Okay, Bahalotcha is page 774, and we're just going to run through some earlier parts of it that we've spent a lot of time on in past years because there is a lot that goes on. But I want to focus on something at the very end, which we invariably never get to, because by the end of the parsha, we already got focused on other things along the way. So Baalotcha begins with Aaron's kindling of the lamps by the menorah and the famous teaching. The Naso, last week's parsha, concluded with the 12 identical gifts that each tribal leader, the leader of each tribe, had brought to be used in the Mishkan. The tribe of Levi did not bring a gift. Instead, we always have 12. So we don't have Levi, so then we have Menashe and Ephraim, the two sons of Yosef. They each brought, and Aaron was feeling somewhat bereft that his tribe was not part of these gifts to the Mishkan. And famously, Rashi brings the Medrash that Hashem said to him, don't worry, your contributions are greater than theirs. You will be lighting the menorah. You'll be lighting the candles. Okay? And there's much talk. What is so unique about the candles? Aaron did all the service. And according to Ramban, it's talking about even after the temple will be destroyed, we will still be lighting candles, referring to the Chanukiah, referring to the Hanukkah lamps. Okay, let's move forward, and we go through exactly how the arrangements over here and the travel on page 779. We have the Pesach offering. We have Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni, right? The women think, oh my gosh, I cleaned once already. Don't talk to me about Pesach Sheni. Don't tell me about a second Pesach. We're finally finding all the things that we put away before Pesach. We finally figure out, where is that corkscrew? Where is that can opener? We finally found it. And now you talk to me about Pesach Sheni. But Pesach Sheni actually had chametz and matzah together. Pesach Sheni was that people who were tamei lenefesh, who were ritually impure, and they were thereby not able to bring the first Pesach, the Pesach sacrifice in its time, they came to Moshe with the question, with the attitude, why should we be missing out? Which is such an important and beautiful attitude, right? Very often we can tend to look at some of our mitzvot as a task list. All right, check that one off, check it off, check it off. All right, took care of that. Oh, now I can play some tennis, right? As we look at it as these tasks that we need to unload. But in fact, as we always say, a mitzvah is an opportunity. Besides the root being commandment, it comes from tzavata, accompaniment. It allows us to have this accompaniment, this connection with God, with the spirituality. And a person is feeling that without that, I'm missing. Like how could I start the day without davening? Right? Without davening, how can I just jump into my day? I need to first speak to God. and then I could deal with all of my dealings. Ideally, a person's supposed to view all these mitzvot as these opportunities. And they were feeling we missed out. We missed out. We didn't bring the Korban Pesach. Is there any way, is there any means through which we can make up that which we missed? And in fact, Moshe spoke to God, and the answer was yes. Pesach Sheni, 1 month later, those who were unable to bring it the first in Nisan can bring it 1 month later in the month of Iyar. And then we're reading on 781, 780, 781, our travels in the Midbar were being led by the cloud and the fire at night, the cloud by day and the fire by night on top of the Mishkan. And it almost becomes, we have to see it in the Hebrew, it almost becomes like this mantra that we're saying, right? Actually, we can take it in English also, we'll save some time. On verse 15, 781, on the day the tabernacle was set up, the cloud covered the tabernacle. That was a tent for the testimony. In the evening, there'll be a fire until the morning. So it would be, verse 16, the cloud would cover it, and appearance of fire at night. Whenever the cloud was lifted, afterwards, the children of Israel would journey. And the place where the cloud would rest, there the children of Israel would encamp. The Hebrew is, Al pi Hashem Yisu, Al pi Hashem Yachanu. According to the word of Hashem, would the children of Israel journey? According to the word of Hashem, they would encamp. Right? 19, right? When the cloud lingered, they'd stay there for a long time. 20, sometimes they'd be there for a number of days. Once again, Al pi Hashem Yachanu, Al pi Hashem Yisu. According to the word of Hashem, they would encamp. According to the word of Hashem, they would journey. Sometimes 21 would be there just evening till morning. And in the morning they would have to journey, right? Or 2 days, or a month, or a year, going to 783. When the cloud would linger, right? Then they would encamp, would not journey, then they would journey. Al pi Hashem Yachanu, Al pi Hashem Yisu. Once again, according to the word of Hashem, they would encamp. According to the word of Hashem, they would journey. It's almost like this mantra. Al pi Hashem Yachanu. By the word of Hashem, they would camp. Al pi Hashem Yisu. By the word of Hashem, they would journey. And that really is life, right? When Ladero asked me how I'm doing, and I said, couldn't it be better, right? Meaning, Al pi Hashem Yachanu, Al pi Hashem Yisu. It doesn't mean that everything is always going exactly as we had planned. What it does mean is everything is always going exactly as Hashem has planned. And we need to recognize Al pi Hashem Yachanu, Al pi Hashem Yisu. Based on Hashem's plans, we camp and then we travel. Yes, Ladero.
So what's the, you're reading it in Hebrew, it kind of brings out the text a little bit more. So why does it use in English a cloud? What instead of just kind of saying according to Hashem?
No, it does. No, the English, right, on the top of 70, when the cloud would linger, that's the Anan. But then at 23, that's the mantra again. According to the word of Hashem, they would encamp. According to the word of Hashem, they would journey. That's that mantra that we've had at least 3 times, unless I missed one along the way. At least 3 times. Al pi Hashem Yachanu, Al pi Hashem Yisu. And that's how it's meant to be. Meaning, ideally, we recognize, I always call it the Allstate commercial. We recognize that we're in good hands. And Al pi Hashem Yachanu, Al pi Hashem Yisu. And then we continue. Everything is going beautifully here. Chapter 10, we have the trumpets, right? How they will be used to summon the entire congregation or to just summon the leaders. And then when we're traveling, right? How the camp would break up as they were traveling, right? We had the 4 different groups around the Mishkan, and how they would go. What was the whole order of their traveling? 785. Everything is in a beautiful, beautiful Seder. Seder order. We have the Pesach Seder. We recognize that everything in life is al pi HaSeder, is based on an order. Al pi Hashem Yachanu, al pi Hashem Yisu. Based on Hashem, we travel, we camp, and we travel. And everything is all great. And then on 786, you'll see something very, very strange. And actually in the Torah itself, that is how it is. I'm sorry, Ora, if you have a different Chumash, we're in Bamidbar, Perek Yud, Pasuk Lamed Hey. If you see there, look, right, even those who are not so comfortable with the Hebrew, look over in the Hebrew, you see on the 4th line from the bottom, and 2nd line from the bottom, you have these paragraph breaks, and you have an upside down, backwards nun. And in the Torah itself, you have these 2 letter nuns, kind of setting off these 2 psukim, these 2 verses, as their own section. And they're considered to be their own section to the degree that we say they're not 5 books of the Torah. There are 7 books of the Torah. 7 books of the Torah? What do you mean? Well, there's Bereshit, Genesis, Shemot, Exodus, Vayikra, Leviticus. You have Bamidbar, where we are now, Numbers, until the first Nun. Until this point, that's 4 books. You have these 2 psukim. That's a 5th book. Then you've got the rest of Bamidbar. That's a 6th book. And then you have Devarim, Deuteronomy. That is the 7th book. Meaning these 2 psukim become their own sefer of the Torah, their own book of the Torah. There are 86 letters, and therefore there are halacha that we learn out that if a sefer Torah has 86 letters, it still has a certain din to it. So what are these 2 psukim, and why are they set off one from the other? And what is the idea of breaking the book of Bamidbar into these 3 books? So we spent a lot of time on it before, last year or 2 years ago, I don't recall. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it now. But the idea is that until this point, we were cooking. We were moving. We were in God's hands. We were there. We were in formation. As Natalie often says to me, stay in lane when I try to get involved in something that's out of my wheelhouse. Right? We were staying in lane. We were doing what we're supposed to be doing. And then the second half of Bamidbar is where things spiral out of control. It spirals out of control. What happens? What are the first words afterwards? The very bottom of 786. Vayihi ha'am k'mitonenim ra be'eznei Hashem. Mitonen is to complain. K'mitonenim is like to complain. Right? There's a child in preschool, right, who would fake cry a lot. And it was such a poor fake cry. It was like, I say, like, you got to work on that. That is not convincing. That is not the least bit convincing. No one thinks you're really crying, you know? That's commit onanim, right? That's when we want to find something to complain about. We want to complain. And that's how it begins. And we complain about the man. and then we complain about the meat, and we complain and we complain, and then it leads to the next parsha, which is Shlach, which is the Meraglim, the spies who came back with their terrible report, which leads to the next parsha, which is Korach and his rebellion against Moshe. I mean, it is rocky stuff. We come on to Balak and Bilam coming to curse us. And then we have the daughters of Moab coming to seduce us. I mean, it goes from bad to worse, right? And this is when we are looking to complain, when we don't recognize and accept Al Pi Hashem Yachanu, Al Pi Hashem Yisu, that is when things spiral out of control. And that is these different sections of the book of Bamidbar. I just saw, it was so sweet. One of my nephews, they're digitalizing all of their, old videotapes. So they sent to the greater Ciner family WhatsApp of all my cousins and siblings and everyone a beautiful, beautiful of my father, Zichrono Livracha, my father, blessed memory, speaking at my niece's bat mitzvah. And it was such a treat seeing him and hearing him speak and sharing it with my kids. And they shared it with their kids, some who have never met my father. Right? It's been almost 20 years now since my father passed away. So it was incredible. And my father very often, if he'd ask someone, "How are you?" and the person would say, "Baruch Hashem," right? Blessed is God. So my father would say, I know God's blessed. I'm asking, how are you? Right? Meaning, Baruch Hashem could be good, and Baruch Hashem could be bad. Right? But it's always supposed to be Baruch Hashem. Blessed is God. Thank God. Why? Because Al Pi Hashem Yachanu, Val Pi Hashem Yisu. Because based on Hashem they travel, and based on Hashem we camp. Right? And when we lose track of that, that is when things spiral out of control. Right? I always say over and over and over, our attitude creates the world that exists around us. Either we're living in a beautiful world or we're living in a terrible world. It doesn't mean, right, no matter what, there are beautiful things and there are challenging things around us. But we decide what world are we living in. And sometimes when I encounter someone who is acting in a very bitter, negative manner, I always think to myself, I'm so glad I don't live in that person's world. I'm so glad I don't live there. It would be a scary, dark, foreboding place. Wow. I'm so glad I live in the world that I live in, right? Not to say that that person might be having a lot of challenges that I'm not having. I'm not undermining them. I'm not slamming them, right? But we control. We always quote Dr. Viktor Frankl, right? The last freedom that a human being has that can never be taken away is the freedom to decide how to react to any given situation. That is our freedom. That is our choice. How do we react to any given situation? And the commit onanim is a very, very, very important word. Commit onanim. We have to say, are we looking to kvetch? Are we looking to complain? Right? And that is where things very often spin out of control. But I don't want to spend more time on that now. I mean, there's so much that goes on over here. But I want to ask you a question. What would you say makes Moshe unique? What makes Moshe unique? Ladero?
The fact that he can speak to Hashem at any given time.
Okay. So one aspect that makes Moshe unique, right? We had earlier, right, in this parsha, I mentioned briefly the idea of Pesach Sheni. The people came to Moshe and said, we were unable to bring the Pesach sacrifice in its time. What can we do? And Moshe's response was, let me get to his exact response. Amazing, amazing words that he says. And he says, Imdu, stand, the Eshma'ah, and I will hear Ma Yitzava Hashem Lachem. Let me hear what Hashem will command. Right? And Rashi, I believe, or else we bring this medrash, right? Fortunate is the person who can say, wait, let me hear what God's going to say. Almost, like we live in a world with, it used to be cable television, now it's on demand, right? On demand is the big thing. Well, imagine you have Hashem on demand. Good question. Let me ask Hashem, right? That's Moshe, right? So Moshe has, right, certainly in terms of his prophecy, right, one unique aspect of his prophecy is that it's really, so to speak, on demand. Good. What else is unique about Moshe, Cheryl?
I think his entire being is devoted to Hashem and helping the Jewish people.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful.
I want to say his kindness.
His kindness?
Kindness.
Okay, so the kindness would be, though, in his ability to give everything for the Jewish people, right? Right? Yes. Okay, so good. Now, the Torah actually, God himself actually speaks about two aspects of Moshe that are completely unique. So let's go to page 794. Perek Yud Bet in Bamidbar, the very last episode, we'll say, of our Parsha. Vatidaber Miriam ba'Aaron b'Moshe. Miriam, and Aaron spoke against Moshe, about Moshe. Alodot ha'isha kushit asher lakach, over this Cushite woman that he had taken. Is this a reference to an additional wife? Is this a reference to Tzipporah? Different views. Vayomru, and they said, Harak ach b'Moshe diber Hashem? Is it only to Moshe that God spoke? Halo gambanu diber. He spoke to us, he speaks to us also. Vayishma Hashem, and Hashem heard what they were saying. Right? Now, the commentators explain that Moshe, it seems, had separated from his wife, was no longer acting intimately with his wife. Why is that? Because he had reached this level of prophecy that he was no longer acting with intimacy towards his wife. And they're saying, well, God speaks also to us, and yet we maintain intimate relationships with our spouses. So they were saying, did God only speak to Moshe? And here, Pasuk Gimel. Here is number one of what the Torah says about Moshe. About Moshe being unique. Va'ish Moshe anav ma'od. Moshe was exceedingly humble. Mikol ha'adam asher al pnei ha'adama. From more than any other person on the face of the earth. Wow. So when we think of being humble, when we think of humility, we often have the wrong idea, right? We think of a person being very humble, right? We almost think of a person being meek, right? And it's interesting, in Tehillim, I looked this up before, right? A quote from the Christian Bible is, "And the meek will inherit the earth," right? Now, much of the Christian Bible is taken from Tanakh, is taken from Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. In Tehillim, chapter 37, verse 11, the pasuk says, "Va'anavim yirshu aretz," right? Which probably in the King James will be mistranslated as "the meek will inherit the earth." But that's not what it means. It says the humble will inherit the earth. V'hit angu al rov shalom, and they will delight with abundant peace. There's a tremendous difference between meek and humble. Meek is a person who's very, very reticent to assert him or herself, right? We will call that a wall, or something like a wallflower. Someone just melts into the background, right? That is meek. Moshe was anything but meek. Anything but meek, right? Moshe was a person who would nonstop stand up for the other. Where do we see that? Where's the first case of Moshe standing up for the other? And it's in ever increasing intensity and strength and power that he's willing to stand up to the other. Where did it all begin?
When he saw the Egyptian taskmaster beating
Good.
the Ivri.
Right, beautiful. He saw the Egyptian taskmaster mercilessly beating the Ivri, right? The Ivri, his brother, the pasuk says, and he stood up and he slayed that Egyptian. Good. Then where do we see it again? Next time we see it? So take a look on page 298. On 298, on verse 11 and 12, we have the first case. Verse 13, we have the second case. Someone take that verse in English. Verse 13, he went out the next day.
He went out the next day, and behold, 2 Hebrew men were fighting. And he said to the wicked one, "Why would you strike your fellow?" He replied, "Who appointed you as a dignitary, a ruler, and a judge over us?"
Okay, so not only does he stand up when an Egyptian was persecuting an Ivri, a Jewish fellow, but when he sees 2 Jews acting improperly, he again stands up when there is injustice. And they say to him, "Are you going to murder us like you murdered the Egyptian?" And he knows he needs to run for his life. And at that point, the person would say, "Okay, I think I've learned my lesson. You stick your neck out, you end up getting hit in the head. Enough's enough." But what happens? He runs away to Midian. Someone takes 16 and 17. He doesn't learn his lesson. Someone take that for us, 16 and 17.
The minister of Midian had 7 daughters. They came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's sheep. The shepherds came and drove them away. Moses got up and saved them and watered their sheep.
Right? So he learned his lesson, right? You don't get involved. No, he didn't learn his lesson. You get involved. He ran for his life because he got involved. He comes to a well. Shepherds are chasing away these girls. What does he do? He gets involved. He saves them and waters their sheep. It's ever increasing involvement, asserting himself for the other. This, of course, reached what we might have thought was the zenith when he went up not against one Egyptian taskmaster, not against two Jews who were fighting, not against these shepherds, but he went up against Paro, the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, the most powerful civilization in the world. He went up against him with the 10 plagues. But that was still not his greatest step up. Yes, Cheryl.
Not without kicking and fighting about doing that.
Yes, that's true. That is true. At first, he did not want to go, right? He felt he was not worthy. He felt others should do it. He felt either Aaron should do it, right? Shlach na biyad tishlach, send with the one that you normally send. He felt he should defer to his older brother Aaron, and Aaron should take that role. Or alternatively, biyad tishlach, whoever you will send, whoever will finish the job, which is Joshua, Yehoshua, let him start the job, right? So yes, right, he felt either that he was not worthy to do it, or he felt that it was not yet the time and it would lead to all the subsequent exiles. Let's wait till it's the time and let it be the complete redemption. But ultimately, he was not the least bit meek. Once he realized that it was him who had to do it, he did it, and he did it to the end. He stood up to Paro. But then there's a time that he stood up even greater than Paro, that he stood up. And that's on page 500. That's after the Chet HaEgel, after the sin of the golden calf. And verse 31, 32, what does he say there? 31, 32, someone else take that for us. Go for it.
31.
Yeah.
Moses returned to Hashem and said, I implore, this people has committed a grievous sin and made themselves a god of gold. And now if you would but forgive their sin, but if not, erase me now from your book that you have written. Wow.
So he's going up against God.
Wow.
Right? Forget about Paro. Forget about the shepherds or the Egyptian taskmaster. He's going up against God. Listen, right? Either forgive them, or I want no part of all this. You could have your nice Torah book, God. Just take me out of it, though, please. I want no part of it. So Moshe is anything but meek. So how do we understand his being more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth? So there's another aspect. Let's go back to where we were in our Parsha on page 794, where God mentions the second aspect of the uniqueness of Moshe, right? And that which, Liddell, you mentioned, that's going to be a manifestation of this. Let's hear. Vayom Hashem pitom Moshe. Hashem said suddenly to Moshe, Aaron, Miriam, Tzu'u shloshtechem, all three of you go out to the Ohel Moed, to the tent of meeting. And they went out. And Hashem came down in a Ba'amud Anan, verse 5, in a cloud, and stood by the entrance of the tent. And he called out Aaron and Miriam. They both went out. Vayomer, and he said, Shimona dvarai, hear now my words. Im yen v'achem Hashem b'mar'eh, elav et vada, b'chalom adaber bo. Prophets amongst you, you have a vision. Through a vision I make myself known. In a dream I speak. That is how I reveal myself to all the other prophets. Lo chen avdi Moshe. That is not the case by my servant Moshe. B'chol beiti ne'eman hu. In my entire house, he is trustworthy. Pe el pe adaber bo. Mouth to mouth I speak to him. Umareh velo bechidot. Right? A clear vision, not through riddles, parables, not through all of these different filtering screens. Utmunat Hashem yabit. And the image of God he can gaze at. Umadua lo yiretem lidaber va'avdi Moshe. Why were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moshe? Right? As I explained according to the Medrash, the sages before, that we're also prophets. Yet Moshe is on a whole different level that removes him from so much of the physicality of this world. But the second unique aspect of Moshe is that he has this pure, clear vision, connection with Hashem. Like Ladaro said before, on demand, but he has this connection to Hashem. Remember before by Har Sinai, anyone else who would ascend the mountain, would touch the mountain, would die. Moshe had to rope off the mountain and then warn them a second time not to draw close. And Moshe was able to ascend that mountain and be there for 40 days and 40 nights, communing with Hashem. So what I want to ask you is, what is the connection? Is there a connection? Is this like two things on his resume? Number one, Mr. Humility, most humble man on earth. Right? Now, I'm a little surprised. I got a coffee mug that said I was the most on earth. Whatever. I guess they made more than one of those coffee mugs. Couldn't believe it. I was shocked. Right? So, number one on his resume, the most humble man on earth. Number two on his resume, pe'al pe'adaberbo, mouth to mouth, face to face, I speak to him. Is it two items on the resume, or are these two interlocking one with the other? Is there a connection between these two?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm understanding, but Rabbi, I just want to say that he was brave. He was very brave. So when he was first called, and he told Hashem, well, couldn't you call on somebody else because I can't even speak? He said, no, it's going to be you. So that he just kind of stepped up, and he was actually chosen because he was so kind and he was so loving, and so I think he was he was humble, but he was also very brave.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%, right? His humility was not meek. He was a lion. Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that. Yes, Cheryl.
Also has to do with his ego. It's like he does not have an ego. His entire being is devoted to principles.
Okay.
And he's like kind of just not personally involved with stuff, like egotistically, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that approach. Right. There are a number of approaches, but on that one, I think you hit the nail on the head. In other words, when it's about me, right? Oh, I stuck my neck out and look what happened. I'm not sticking my neck out again. What does that mean? What am I basically saying? I am more important than the cause. I am more important than the principle. I stood up because something wrong happened. But look what happened. I suffered as a result. So now in the future, when I have to weigh I versus what's right or wrong, well, it might be wrong, but I is going to win because I stuck my neck out and I was hurt by that. Therefore, I'm out. Don't call on me anymore. That's putting myself first. But Moshe, it was never about him. It wasn't about him with the Egyptian. It wasn't about him with the two Jews who were fighting. It wasn't about him with the shepherds. And it wasn't about him when it came to Paro. Right? I don't think I'm the right one to do it. Right? Aaron, Yehoshua, I don't speak well. Right? It doesn't make sense. God said, you say I'm the one to do it? Okay. It's not about me. Right? Sometimes we can view service as a way of, I'll be known as Rabbi Ciner, one of the rabbis of Irvine, right? Or it could be service. The service is an end in and of itself. It's doing, it's helping people, doing what we understand to be God's work. That's an end in and of itself. Yes, Ora.
Well, you just said it, yeah. If we take it to today's life, and we have situations, we have to know if we are coming from it's all about me or to be helpful to the cause.
Yeah. There's a great expression in the Gemara which says, "B'makom she'ein ish, sham tehei ish." In a place where there is no one to step forward, then you step forward. Equally important is b'makom she'yesh ish. If there is someone who's already stepping forward and is being taken care of, then don't step forward. Right? Allow that person the role, the limelight. Right? It's not about me. It's about what we're trying to accomplish. And Moshe, once it was clear that he was the one to go to Paro, he went like a lion. As Rose said, with such bravery, he went like a lion to Paro. And then the epitome of it's not about me is what we saw in the last example, when he went up against God. And he said, look, if you're not going to forgive them, take me out of the book. Right? If I can't help, if I can't advocate and help for the others, then it's not about me. I don't need to be in your book. I don't want to be in your book. That was Moshe, an expression that I've said often, quoting a student of mine who's now a wonderful educator in his own right, Reuven Abragamov. The only thing that stands between you and God is you. The only thing that stands between you and God is you. And if we'll talk on a sociological principle, we mentioned a number of times, if there are two people in a relationship, what is the level of their relationship? It stops at the interest of the least interested party. He wants to get married. She's willing to send a postcard once a month. They'll send postcard once a month. She's the least interested level. And that seals it off. Well, between us and God, the least interested party is us. So the only thing that God's all in. We're the ones who set the limit. The only thing that stands between you and God is you. And a Moshe who had no me, no ego, no, it's all about me. It's I, that's what matters. A Moshe who has no such feelings, so there's nothing that's stopping God from permeating, from being pale, face to face, intimately, that connection. Because it's the ego, it's the I, it's all about me that stands in the way. So exactly like Cheryl said, the connection between the two is very, very clear. If I've got my ego, if I'm lacking in my humility, so then I don't have room for God to come in. Right? The Gemara says, the Talmud says, that a person who walks the koma zakufa in an upright, haughty manner, right, with arrogance, he is dochek ragle shechina. Incredible way of putting it. He pushes away the legs of the divine presence. When you say Hashem's throne is in the heavens and his footstool is down here, if I'm arrogant, what am I doing? I'm pushing away his feet. No room for God. Ciner's here, right? Pushing away God. No room for God. If a person is haughty, he's dochek ragle shechina, pushes away the legs, so to speak, of the divine presence. When there is no ego, there is no I, there is no me, then b'chol beiti nenu, these two go exactly with one another. Ora?
Not to take away from Moshe's greatness, but Moshe had the experience of Hasnei Boer, right? The burning bush, and that was not witnessed by everybody. It was, I guess, just his own experience. So I think that emboldened him and empowered him to go all the way to be service or to serve God.
I hear that, but keep in mind that the burning bush was after the Egyptian, after the two Jews fighting, after the shepherds. Before it was there that he was being sent to go to Paro, and that's when he started refusing. So it still was a process that he needed to go through. It wasn't the burning bush said, all right, man, I'm invincible, here I come, right? It was at the burning bush that he was given the mission to go to Paro, and mi ani, who am I? Ki elech el Paro, that I should go to Paro. But certainly I think his having that vision and that almost a microcosm of a Har Sinai experience later, that certainly emboldened him that he could, once he was told, you're the one, he knew that then he could, and that helped give him that strength to go forward.
Did I understand correctly that he refused after the burning bush experience?
It was at the burning bush experience that the whole thing happened. Yes. Yes, it was there. Yes, Cheryl.
I was going to say, he also had this amazing, clear perspective of what was evil and what wasn't. And so he was, I think that injustice and evil were so apparent to him that he knew what the correct causes to stand up for were.
Nice. Good. Any other ideas in the connection between the humility and the prophecy?
Yeah, I have one idea. Someone mentioned Moshe was a humble person, but I think, just thinking about it, I think it takes a really humble person to be brave. I don't think a person who's not humble can even be brave, just from experience.
Interesting. Interesting thought, Ian. Interesting thought.
You can rush into things and a fool rushes in, but a real humble person does it the right way.
Okay. Okay. Another thought that I had is the closer, who am I comparing myself to? Right? In other words, I could go play basketball with the second graders and shoot around with them and say, hey, I'm pretty good. I'm a pretty good basketball player. Right? And then I can go to, a playground where you have some NBA players coming during the summer, right? And all of a sudden I say, ooh, maybe I'm not quite the ball player I thought I was, right? Who is one associating with? What league are we in? Moshe had this incredible closeness with Hashem. He had this peh, face to face, this incredible closeness to Hashem. The closer one is with Hashem, the more one realizes their own lackings, their own inadequacies, their own areas where they are so physical, so down. So another way of looking at it is that the closer I am to Hashem, the closer I am to perfection, the more glaring my inadequacies are. And therefore, the more humble I become when I recognize what Hashem is. When I recognize what perfection truly is, then I recognize how far I am. Keeping in mind, if I just add one other layer to that, is that the closer I am to Hashem, the more that is expected from me. And therefore, any of my lackings are that much more magnified. You have a dirty glass, a dirty window, and then a car goes by and splashes, and another piece of mud goes onto it. You hardly notice it. But you have this perfectly clean glass, perfectly clean, and then a little speck goes on it. It's like, whoa, what's that? You got to clean that off, right? It's so apparent, right? And Moshe, who was there, who had reached this level, understood that actually each imperfection, each inadequacy, each fault is truly magnified. There's just a wonderful expression. I'm not sure where I heard it from, but it's a fantastic expression, and it really, I think, crystallizes that what we discussed today, and that humility is not being meek, right? But humility is not thinking less of oneself, but it's thinking of oneself less. All right, which is great. I don't think any less of myself. I think I'm a pretty good person. I think I have some decent abilities. I think I can accomplish. I think I can do. I'm not thinking less of myself. I'm thinking of myself less. Right? Right? That's the ego that Cheryl had said. I'm not in it for me. I'm not thinking about myself. I'm not thinking, what will I gain from this? How will I walk away from this? So it's not thinking less of oneself. It's thinking of oneself less and focusing ourselves on what can we do for the other. And that is really, I think, at the crux of what we're discussing today. And that was Moshe's greatness. Moshe's greatness was that he was all for the other. There was no ego. He was not in it for himself, to the point of, take me out of the book. Take me out of the book. And that's what enabled him to have that incredible closeness with Hashem. Now, none of us are going to reach Moshe's level of closeness, but each and every one of us in our own paths, as we go through, it's our humility and our willing to accept things beyond our control, like we started, al pi Hashem yachanu, al pi Hashem yisu, recognizing that we are being led by Hashem and camped by Hashem, and recognizing that and going along with that, and in whatever situation we find ourselves, trying to do the most for others, be it for Hashem, be it for other people, bein adam l'chavera, between man and man, bein adam l'makom, between person and God, whatever it is, that is how we also attain the greatest closeness that we, non-Moshes of the world, that we non-Moshes can attain. Okay, my friends, we will call it over here. Good seeing everybody. Anybody wants to speak up, feel free to.
Rabbi, your last comment just sort of does beg the question a little bit, because, for example, we always say that Moshe kind of didn't get to attend to his children as much as one would think, Gershon, and so when you say between man and man, or between man and Hashem, we know we should always try and cultivate between man and Hashem. But if have primary responsibilities, shouldn't our choice to be available to the other include, those? I could be off davening 6 hours a day, but shouldn't I instead be trying to make sure I educate my children?
Yes, we need to find the balance, right? We need to find the balance. And it's interesting, we don't find, the Torah doesn't hold back criticism when criticism is due. And Moshe gets criticized for different things, right? Yet we don't find him being criticized for his children. That we don't find. So it would seem that, even though his children did not turn out as I'm sure he would have hoped they would, but he was, the Torah, which does not hold back criticism when it's due, does not criticize Moshe in regard to that, right? But we certainly need to try our very best to find the right balance between our bein adam l'chavero, bein adam l'makom, that which we do for others, that which we do for our family, right? When it comes to chesed, right? So then those closest to us need to be the greatest recipients of chesed. I remember when I was in yeshiva, right? One of the guys who were engaged and going to different talks with different rabbeim, and they would say, you might be such a big bal chesed that you want to jump. Oh, this person needs a ride from the airport. Oh, sure. Right? Maybe your wife needs you home that night. Right? So maybe the chesed is the greater chesed is being home. It might be less glamorous, and people aren't going to be saying, "Oh, he's such a good guy. He drove all the way to the airport to get so and so." But it's the right chesed. And yeah, Janet, a person always needs to find their balance, right? Davening with a minyan is important, right? If things are going crazy in the house, then maybe the husband should stay home and help the wife with the witching hours, we used to call it, and help get the kids bathed and into bed, and then daven by themselves without a minyan. Yeah, right. These are all These are all the considerations. That's the juggling that we all need to do in life. And it's those are always the hard questions. You know, how, when, where do we prioritize? Right? Yeah. But certainly we need to find that balance. At the same time, again, though, I do repeat, the Torah does not censure Moshe regarding his sons. So how to view that is not so simple. Yeah, that is a good point, Janet. Okay, everybody. We'll be back on Thursday, 12:30, continuing the piece on the centrality of Israel to the Jewish people, which, with all that's going on in the world today, I think is an important point for us to gain clarity on. Okay, my friends. Good seeing everybody.
Thank
Have
you,
a good rest
everybody.
of the day.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good day.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shalom, shalom.
Thank you.